Hello, welcome to the Sovereign Magazine show, a transformational experience where conscious conversations meet embodied wisdom. Each episode invites visionary healers, thought leaders, and change makers to share their journeys of awakening, offering listeners practical tools and soul-stirring insights to reclaim their inner authority. We have the beautiful Abby Tishieta back today with the Cycle Breaker's Sacred Boundaries. I'm going to let her introduce herself, and then we'll talk about the theme for today.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Nicole. I'm so excited to be here as always. I just love these conversations that we've been having all year. And I can't believe we're already like more than halfway through the year, which is just blows my mind. But I am Abby Teixeira. I'm calling in from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, Treaty 6 territory. I am a speaker. I'm a published author and writer. I'm a trauma recovery guide and a feminine leadership mentor. I'm also a complex trauma survivor myself and in recovery from addiction for over a decade. And I'm a mama of four. And the work I do in the world is I guide cycle breaking women like myself, and especially those that are healing from trauma, addiction, and survival based identities. And also, especially Black, Indigenous women of color who are mothers, healers, coaches, and creatives to really move out of that isolation and survival and into embodied, community rooted leadership. And how I do that is by holding sacred spaces where their grief, their rage, their truth, and their wisdom can be witnessed, integrated, and transformed into sovereignty. And so I work with a lot of different modalities in my over 12 years of this journey that I've been on. And so my work really blends identity shifting transformational coaching, human design, ancestral wisdom, and feminine leadership to guide others to reclaiming their voice, their power, their purpose. And I'm also the founder of the Healing Mama Collective and Reclaim and Rise and the Sovereign Seasons ceremony gatherings. And I truly believe that, deeply believe that our lived experience holds the medicine that the world needs. And that's why these conversations are so important to me.
Yes, 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 yes. I feel the same. We have so much fun doing these together.
Yeah.
So if you've missed any of the foundational episodes 1 through 5 about are you a cycle breaker and estrangement and things like that, definitely go back and listen. Today we're talking about the body remembers of somatic healing, nervous system repair, and safety after trauma.
Mhm.
So where I want to start with is how do you know if you're holding trauma in your body, right? Like, I think most people would say, well, yeah, I've experienced trauma in some sort of way. I mean, it could be as simple as a car accident, right? That could be traumatic, or falling off the swing as a child. That might have been scary, right? We've all had something that was traumatic, but how do we know when our body is holding on to the trauma that maybe even trauma that our mind can't access?
Mm, absolutely. What I've learned in my journey, my own personal healing and recovery journey, is that trauma isn't just something that happens to us, it's something that happens inside of us, right? And so you mentioned the mind, and sometimes, oftentimes with trauma, the body remembers what the mind has tried to forget. So we may not even remember certain traumatic experiences that we've lived through, especially in early childhood, especially in those years where we aren't verbal, where we're not like, we can't speak for ourselves kind of thing, right? And so healing isn't about forgetting. It's really about allowing our bodies to experience safety again, because that's what happens when we live with trauma, is that our body and our nervous system experience this feeling of like not feeling safe. And oftentimes, like for myself, I knew why. But other times, there were certain things, like you said, like certain triggers that were really interesting for me. Like, why is this affecting me? Why am I feeling this nervous system deactivation, all of that kind of stuff, right? But in my own journey, I'll weave in, I spent years trying to really think my way into healing. I read so many books. I went to therapy. I understood that I understood my trauma intellectually, but I still felt very anxious on certain experiences. Hypervigilance was something that I still very much, I'm aware of it now, but I had a lot of hypervigilance, always waiting for that feeling of always waiting for that other shoe to drop, right? And it wasn't until I discovered nervous system healing that I realized that my mind had healed much faster than my body. I made peace with a lot of the traumatic experiences that I had gone through, but my body was still holding on to something, right? And so knowledge really changed my understanding, but safety has been what has changed my life.
Mm. Like I said, I always have mind-blowing experiences when we have conversations because you said hypervigilance. That is exactly who I am. I am a preventer. Like I
Mhm.
do everything in my life to prevent something,
Mhm.
whether it's how I park my car to make sure that it doesn't get hit by somebody else, or where I park my car so it doesn't get dinged and dented. I mean, this is like on the superficial level. So
Yeah.
just think about it on my personal body level and the things that I do and how hyper vigilant I am around my surroundings, especially with my daughter. And like we live really close to where she's going to go to high school, and I'm not sure I can let her walk to school
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
I was sexually assaulted as a child and molested. And so I have all of these things in me, and I'm like, well, why would I not want to protect her, right? So let's go a
Mm.
little bit more into this hypervigilance and what it means for the body to remember, because now that I'm recognizing some extra patterns, if you will, in my life, I realize my body remembers, but I have not integrated those feelings yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Trauma again it isn't just simply the event, right? It's really what happened inside of the nervous system is what I'm learning and really understanding truly in my own life. And hypervigilance is one of these adaptations that we learned to survive, right? And so the body was learning that the world isn't safe. And so in order for me, especially as children, when a lot of our world we have very little control of, right? We have parents, we have caregivers, we have systems that we are very much controlled in, and as a child, when our world is unsafe, we have to figure out ways to for it to be safe, right? And so there is a number of different experiences that many survivors can relate to. Hypervigilance is one of them. Dissociation, like where you literally, as a survival mechanism, you leave your body during these experiences, right? Or you just kind of slip in and out of presence, which I understand that to be true now. Because even for a while, I didn't even know what dissociation was because it was so normal for me that I didn't ever look at it as something that even had a name. I was like, oh, that's what it is. Like I had no idea that that was even an adaptation that I had learned in order to survive, right? And the cool and interesting thing to learn about trauma is that, and I really want to make this distinction because I even think about my own family system, and I have two siblings, right? And two people can experience the same event. One develops trauma and one doesn't. Why is that? Right? Because the trauma isn't the event, it's really the nervous system response, right? And so it's the trauma isn't what happened, it's what happened inside because of that happening, right? And a lot of these ideas I learned from, people like Peter Levine, Dr. Gabor Mate, who really speak to this, who've done years of research around all of this, right? And I know one of the books that for me was very foundational in the beginning of my healing journey was The Body Keeps the Score. And really understanding that our body remembers the yelling, it remembers the walking on eggshells. I can't remember what the yelling was about or what was said necessarily, but I remember how my body responded to the yelling, the glass breaking, the unpredictability, the emotional neglect, the fear, like always feeling fear and panic, and also the silence, right? And so even decades later, now I'm in my 40s, someone raises their voice and my nervous system immediately responds before my mind does, right? And so growing up for me, I've shared in this series, I grew up in an alcoholic home, right? And so my body very much learned as soon as I entered any room to scan the room, right? Anticipate any sort of danger, shrink myself, make myself small so I wouldn't be noticed, so that I wouldn't get in the way of my parent who was, in addiction, all of that kind of stuff. People pleasing, it's like, okay, yes, yes, I'll do that. Yeah, even though I didn't want to. Those kind of patterns, they didn't disappear just because I became an adult. My body like remembers those things, right? And so my body was really protecting me from a world that, and it continues to protect me from a world that may not even exist anymore because my home life is so different from that. But yet I still react in those ways, right? And like even with my kids, I have four kids and they're 7 and under. And so it's very chaotic here sometimes, you know, like there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of energy, there's a lot of things. And I, as a cycle breaker, and I, as somebody who is actively healing and not wanting to pass these reactions to my children, I have to be very aware of when these things are happening. Right. So many people understand, you know, fight, flight, freeze, but there's also fawning, right? And fawning has been a really big one where I've really learned to understand how many times, like how much in which I abandoned myself, you know, growing up and just kind of gave in, you know, and fawned to, you know, my abusers, to the circumstances, all of that kind of stuff, right? And you know, when we think about those fight, flight, freeze, you know, fight is about I'm going to protect myself, right? So I'm going to fight. Flight is like I need to get out of here, I need to escape, right? Freeze is like let me disappear, I need to like go somewhere, I need to just like be away from this kind of thing, right? Fawning is like I'll do and I'll become whoever you need me to be, right? And then that's where like the people pleasing, the perfectionism, the over functioning, the shrinking really comes to mind for me. And you know, I thought for so many years I thought that people pleasing was part of my personality, you know, and it wasn't. It was my nervous system trying to keep me safe, right? And so really learning about these distinctions, how this appears in my life has been so fundamental for me to be able to break these patterns, right? So I know that if I'm distracted and I'm not present, my kids are around me and I'm, you know, say I'm on my phone. I grab my phone and I get like lost in the doom scroll, you know, and I'm in that zone and my kids like something will break or someone will start screaming or, you know, like it's just like a shock, an immediate shock. And it's almost like the response I have is automatic. It's like an automatic instant. I don't think about it. It's just automatic. And that's my nervous system responding to like, oh, danger, something's happening, right? I always talk to my clients about how, because I work with, like I mentioned, I work with women who are primarily healing from trauma. And, you know, I always tell them that our nervous system doesn't understand the difference between being chased by a tiger and a plate breaking. You know, it's going to react as danger. That's what's going to signal to us, right? And so it's so important to have that awareness. And I know for myself, in order for me to be safe and in order for my kids to be safe, when they are around me, I need to prioritize presence. I need to be with them in those moments so that it's easier for me to catch myself when things, because inevitably things are going to happen. Like I said, I have 4 kids. Three of them are boys, you know, and they're in this like crazy stage right now where it's just like, let me see what happens if I drop this, and like, let me see like what happens if I do this, and like, you know, just really exploring and stuff like that. And they're just doing kid things, you know, they're just doing kid things. And I know that I have to be present with them when they're doing these things because if I'm not, if I'm distracted, if you know, my mind isn't there, my body's going to take over and it's going to react in these ways that I don't want to react in, right? Whereas now, where I know, you know, that like if I'm present, then I'm like, oh, I feel it, the danger's coming up, okay, and then I'll vocalize, which I've shared in previous episodes. You know, some of the ways in which I have learned to co-regulate with them and also speak to them about what's mommy doing when I'm feeling overwhelmed, you know, when I'm feeling unsafe, and naming those things for them so that they understand, right?
Mm. You know what you have to look forward to is where I'm at with my daughter. So she's 14 and a half
Mhm.
now. And all the things you shared, I have. I can't, yelling is like not an option in this house because
Yeah,
I get like it literally will trigger me so quickly. I grew up in a yelling house, of course.
same. Yeah.
And but now my daughter recognizes my cues and she'll right away be like, "What's wrong, mommy? Are you
Mhm.
okay?" And yesterday I wasn't feeling good. And so I said, "Oh, I'm not feeling good. I'm so tired. Is there anything I can do for you?" And so these are the beautiful things that when we co-regulate together, she can sense me just as much as I can sense her. And so it's just a beautiful thing that you are doing this so early with your children. My daughter, I would say, was probably about 8 when I
Mhm.
started everything. And so they're going to grow up in such a beautiful, beautiful household. But I do want to go back to one thing that you mentioned, which was safety. And so, how do you start to teach your body that it feels safe when all it knows is survival mode?
Yeah, yeah, very important. So, like I mentioned, in all of the different modalities that I kind of dived into, This is why I truly believe in, and listen, I still have a therapist. I have two of them actually, and I've been with them for over a decade. And so I definitely believe that that work is important. But for me, talk therapy wasn't enough, right? Like therapy is awesome, coaching is wonderful, insight is wonderful, but the body also needs an experience. And what I've really learned in this new phase of my healing and recovery journey is that healing really happens when the body experiences safety through co-regulation, through consistency, through boundaries, through repair, because we can't think our way out of our nervous system response. Like it just
Mhm.
doesn't work that way. Right. And so this is where, for me, a lot of somatic practices have really come into into my field, breath work, literally going outside with my bare feet, on the grass in my backyard, grounding there literally transforms you in just minutes, community witnessing. This is why I'm such a big advocate about creating community, of having women coming together, of being able to witness each other, hold space for each other, so that we can actually speak to these things that we've been through and all of that kind of stuff. And we're not talking about trauma dumping, it's like talking about the experience, right? What we experience as a result of the trauma, right? And then a lot of, like, of course, my recovery work, voice work, learning to speak, because I mentioned one of the things that I'm breaking in my family lineage is the cycle of silence, right? And how much we have to hold that silence in when we can't speak our truth or we can't speak to our experience. Another modality for me that has been just life changing has been human design. I've just gone all in on it because it has been just so cool to learn about how I'm actually designed, and
Mhm.
then I have a clear picture of the ways in which I've been so conditioned to be out of alignment with my natural design, right? And then
Mhm.
learning how to trust my body, and I do that by slowing down. I know I've seen some reels recently where it's like, because obviously my algorithm just feeds me a lot of like trauma content and all of that kind of stuff, and I saw this reel the other day where it was like, um teaching our body that not everything is an emergency. And it was so eye-opening for me to see, because it showed this person who obviously has this nervous system, dysregulation, and this, like, that hypervigilance, and that, like, that urgency, that feeling that many of us survivors have. And it showed him, like, quickly brushing his teeth, like aggressively and quickly eating food so quickly, like, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel so seen. Because, like, that is so me. Like, everything is about, like, rush, like, let's go, we got to get out of here. Like, it's like, and that's a part of my nervous system responding in that way, right? Where it's like not safe. And so now it's about slowing down. So we just got back from a week, a family vacation, beautiful time. And on our way there, we were running a little bit behind because, packing all the four kids and everything, So and we also surprised them that we were taking a plane. They didn't know that, and they thought that we were going to drive there. And it's like a 2-day trip normally, because we've done this before. And so we're rushing and getting them all in and everything. And then I could sense, when I was in the van with my husband, he was driving, I can sense his urgency, right? When his nervous system was kind of in that high alert. And he was like, oh, like, we're running behind, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, let's take a breath. Because I noticed, right? And I was like, let's take a breath. I'm like, we have plenty of time. Let's just say that. We have plenty of time. Right. And he was like, okay. And he's like, yeah, we have plenty of time. And then we got there, sure enough, like, on time. Everything was smooth. We got, park and ride, all of that kind of stuff. But it was interesting how, just that co-regulation, how that switched everything in the car. Like, in the van, the energy completely shifted because I acknowledged that he was in that kind of panic mode, right? And then I'm very, very sensitive to those kind of energies as well. And I didn't want to be in that mode either, right? So it was like, plenty of time. We're gonna get there on time. It's okay. Let's take some breaths. And, like, many times that happened. Like, even with my son, my 4-year-old, he's been always dreaming of going on an airplane, but he's very cautious. He's very cautious about new experiences. I don't want to say he's fearful, but he's cautious, And so although he was excited to get on the plane, as soon as he saw, like, he could see through the window, the plane was parked, and they had that tunnel that you walk through to get to get to the doors of the plane. And he saw we were standing at the front of the tunnel, and he was like, oh, mommy, I don't like this. I'm kind of scared. He's like, I don't know about this, and he was starting to kind of panic because, like, it looked scary and dark, right? And then so I was like, okay. And then so in that moment, once again, because I was present with them in that moment, I just told him, I was like, where are you feeling it? He's like, oh, just like like right here, like in his chest, right? And so, and then the other kids were around and stuff. I'm like, okay, if you feel it, I'm like, wherever you feel it, just let's start shaking our bodies, right? Like let's start like doing this and like, and so we started shaking our arms and our legs and we started like on our booties and all that stuff. And then all of us were doing it. And then we're like, okay, let's do some breaths, And then we did a couple of breaths and I'm like, and they love the lion's breath, right? And so like at the end they like to roar and stuff, right? And so we did that, and then he was like, he was okay. And so we walked through the tunnel, like, see, and we explained to him, like, we're just gonna walk through here. It's okay, it's safe. We're all gonna be together, and then we're gonna get on the plane and stuff, right? And so it was these small moments where I started to really see, just the work in action. The years that I have invested in myself, to be able to learn how to co-regulate, to learn safety in my own body, I'm now sharing with my kids, right? And there were many instances throughout our trip because there was a lot of firsts. There was a lot of first times for a lot of things where, I was able to help them through this, right? And then as a result, they helped me too. Right. And so it's this beautiful like art of co-regulation, right? And so really healing isn't one modality, as you can tell, right? It really is a relationship. And it's a first and foremost a relationship with myself, with my body, with safe people, with nature, with my ancestors, right? And so every time I choose safety over that feeling of survival, my body has learned something new. Just like my son learned, something new about getting on an airplane, what it was going to look like, right? My body's doing the same thing when I'm learning different ways instead of reacting at the way that I have always just instinctively, right? Because of the what do you call it, the experience that I had in childhood and all of that kind of stuff, right? And so yeah.
Wow. What a priceless gift,
Mm,
really. I mean, if you think about this on an energetic level and cutting cords and generational trauma and ancestral healing and how your children are going to look back, they're not going to know a world any other way.
mhm,
Right? And that's how my daughter feels now. Her friends ask her, like, how do you think like this? Or how did you get to be like this? They'll come over to our house and say, wow, your house is so calm and peaceful.
mhm,
And they just recognize that we're different. They don't always have words for it, but they feel the feeling and they
mhm,
want to come here, right?
mhm,
And so that is just such a beautiful reflection of how good it can get when you do the work.
mhm,
Now, I recognize that there might be some people at the very beginning of their work.
mhm,
And I will say I'm only 6 years into this, so I'm only halfway, but everybody has a different timeline. And so don't be worried. I had somebody say to me one time, I've been doing this for 30 years and you've only been doing it for 3 and you're further along than me. Everybody has a different timeline. So don't be worried about that. But what I want to stress is that when you do this work and if you are committed, there will be these moments, like
mhm.
Abby just expressed, of, wow, look at how far I've come. And so, my final question of the day is, how do you honor your body's own timeline and then also honoring knowing that there's something else that's possible for your body to finally feel other than survival? So how do you kind of balance, like, you want to be in one certain space, right? Like, think back to yourself 12 years ago, an alcoholic and all of that. You couldn't imagine where you're at now. And that's how I feel. I'm like 6 years ago. If you had told me I'd be here, I'd be like, you're batshit
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
So, yeah. So basically, how do we honor our body's timeline for healing and also encouraging people to understand what is possible when we do finally feel safe in our body?
So first I want to get something out of the way is that, people have this idea that healing means that once you healed, you're not going to have any more triggers. You're not going to have any anxiety or fear, like, and so I want to get that out of the way that that's not true. Like you
Yeah.
still will, you know. What healing means to me is that my body now recovers more quickly. right? My nervous system is learning. It hasn't learned yet, but it's learning to trust me. And so I know now how to come home to myself, right? So healing isn't about never being dysregulated again. It's learning how to return. And like you said, this takes time, and everybody has their own timelines, their own things that they have to overcome. My journey is so different from your journey, and vice versa, and so not to compare. They say that comparison is the thief of joy, and it truly is, right? Like, it's not fair to compare yourself with somebody who has, there's so many things, XYZ, right? And so really, if I could give anybody hope, is that you're not broken. Your body literally is brilliant for adapting the way it did for you to survive, right? But now it's time to learn something new, right? And so your nervous system may have never learned, that safety, right? But now it can, right? And so there's so many different things, like, our like I mentioned, our body will always remember what our mind tries to forget. So just being conscious of that, right? And then healing starts to begin when our body starts to learn and believe that the danger has passed. And that requires, a lot of self-talk, a lot of different things, right? And so like I said, like, like, let's get it out of the way. That and a funny story quickly, at the 3-year mark for me, I remember feeling exhausted of my journey because I had dived. It was a full-time job for me, right? Like, I was, like, leaving addiction. I no longer had that crutch for me, to numb and all of that kind of stuff. But, I remember feeling exhausted at one point. I'm like, when is this going to be done? When am I going to graduate? When am I going to be able to just say I've healed, and then just, like, sit back and relax, right? And a sweet mentor of mine at the time just kind of laughed a little bit and just gave me a hug and was like, you have to remember that you're choosing this new path, and you choose it every single day. Right. And you get to choose this every single day. Right. And so, unfortunately and fortunately, there is no end result. There is no, you've graduated and now you can move on. It's just that we learn new things. Right. And then lastly, one of the greatest myths in is that healing is a solo journey. And in reality, our nervous systems are wired for connection. We learn safety in relationship. Many of us have wounding in relationships, and many of us heal in relationship, right? And so find people that you can be around that are safe for your nervous system, that don't activate you in these toxic ways. If you have to have boundaries around certain people, choose yourself. Choose yourself, right? So that you can begin something new and create safety enough to be able to finally become who you've always been, beneath the trauma, beneath the conditioning, beneath all of the things, right? And so there is hope. And I'm definitely one of those people that you can look to. And it's like, if she can do it, I can do it. Right?
No, for sure, for sure. And I just want to emphasize, spoiler alert, there's no end to the healing, because I feel like every time I get to a layer where I'm like, oh, okay, I think that's healed, somebody else will say something on a podcast and I'm like, oh man, that's another layer for that same subject, because it's so much deeper. And as we peel back layers, there's just more and more and more that we need to look at. And I think of growth now as exciting, because the more that I know myself, the more that I feel like I am returning to my truest essence, if you will, that was conditioned out of me. I didn't even hear myself until I was 43. All I
Mm,
could hear were my parents in my brain.
mm,
And so I've only lived really with myself for 3 years. So
yeah.
I've got a lot of conditioning to undo here, which brings me to our eighth episode is going to be about ancestral remembrance and decolonized healing, returning to your roots. And I know that my personal roots run so deeply, not on my actual like DNA side, but my roots of my spiritual side.
Mm,
Oh, that comes in so strongly. And so I can't wait to hear what we're going to be talking about
yeah.
next. And I absolutely love our shows. If anybody wants to work with Abby, all her details will be in the show notes. She's absolutely life-changing. She's also in our community, community.sovereign-magazine.com. And we will see you for the eighth episode. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Nicole.